Dun 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 dun. Welcome back, friends. Today I thought I'd take a little time to talk about one of my favorite games. In fact, it happens to be an RPG, and if you've run into me in various online forums, you may have encountered me as a PFRPG Grognard Brother fan, or if you're in one of my online games as the Emerald GM. That's right. One of the things I do to relax, aside from hitting bags, throwing people, drawing, making creative projects, is playing role-playing games. And my favorite? No, it's not Dungeons and Dragons. It's Pathfinder. Now we're about at the 2-year mark since Paizo, the publisher for Pathfinder, put a bullet in the brain of Pathfinder 1st Edition by announcing that they were going to release Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, needless to say, I didn't care for the changes for 2nd Edition, so Pathfinder is where it's at for me. Because when I started with the game, if I say Moldvay box or something to that extent for you gamer nerds out there, this is what I'm talking about. The basic. But even when basic was released, they knew that would not be enough for people. So there was an expert book released with that, and then later releases would also release, what were they called, Champion and Immortal versions. And then beyond that was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, to me, the ultimate version of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was the 3rd edition version, which begat Pathfinder, which begat the ultimate advanced version of Dungeons and Dragons. That is my shelf copy of the core rule book. I actually have a second copy for playing, which is properly dog-eared and just beat to absolute pieces. So you can see this shelf is my kind of my setting shelf, even though it has my old basic books and 1st edition stuff and all of that. Oh, by the way, who is me? Me is me. Jamie, many other names. Emerald GM, if you want to stay in the realm of RPGs. But we us gamers love to show off our shelves, and I'm always in search of the ultimate shelf, and at the moment, the ultimate Pathfinder shelf, though I won't claim to have it, because even within my own circle, I know that John, who runs the local friendly game shop, has the best shelf, so there's no comparison. But I'm happy with what I've come up with, because believe it or not, I actually take inspiration or ideas, and in some cases even mechanics, from all these books, and put it into my current games, and I use that kind of inspiration and the quick thinking that's needed to properly run a game to keep my imagination properly oiled, keep those creative gears turning, and it's kind of like a mental exercise for my creative muscles, and then I can jump off of there and work on a script or a graphic novel or a book of prose, what have you. So yeah, that's a peek at my ultimate Pathfinder shelf. Now I pulled the core rule book out so I would be able to pull these things out. So these are actual books that I use in creating the mechanics of my personal Pathfinder games. 101 new skill uses. That means this video is going to be just me pulling out every single freaking book on my shelf. I don't think that would be very, very exciting. But I'm going to show you some things, and then I will make my recommendations. I'm going to give you, we'll say, 3 recommendations. How does that sound? Some of these things I didn't even know existed until I ran across them. Like this, I think, is more of a setting book. Conflict is for player versus player gaming. Believe it or not, tactically driven for player versus player. Using Pathfinder, which player versus player seems to be the default setting for a lot of current online games. I find that I constantly have to ask people not to fight with each other in the party, that they need to be able to get along if they're going to survive the dungeon. Even some of the groups I've played in, other players have been assholes at times. some of the groups that I run, you know, we get into braggadocious activity, and then it turns into, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and ultimately it bogs the game down. I mean, if that's all you want to do, players can just meet up and do that. Now these I always like to keep at hand when I'm running the various dungeon dressing, wilderness dressing, urban dressing, the GM's miscellany from Raging Swan Press. Red Dragon Inn, Guide to Inns and Taverns. Definitely the best inn book, or tavern book. Even though I don't think it has anything for brawls, fortunately. Brawls are covered in the urban dressings. But this covers, this has the best variety of alcoholic beverages for your fantasy world. What have you. There you can see standard Pathfinder Paizo releases, and then some Kobold Press, Advanced Race Compendium. So everything is supplemented by these fantastic third-party materials. So since the last time I've shown this shelf, you know, I've been amassing, there's a little bit of semi-spoiler things I'm trying to get painted during this downtime. I've actually been working through all this pandemic nonsense because I am considered essential, but right now I'm taking a few days off. Get my creative wheels greased once again. Back to my spoiler. I'm going to try to paint these suckers. So there you got a beholder. There is current iteration of Brother Fenn. He's currently trapped in Ravenloft in a 20th level Mythic campaign. So I'm going to paint up a new version of Brother Fenn for those of you that have played with him. There's something from Mythic Pantheon Mythic Battles, whatever it's called. Not even Pathfinder, but they make great little figures. Now here's a super rare piece. It's a Taz Tarkus from John Carter of Mars. I started painting it. I've got the green base coat down. You see I've got the rock painted black. I just need to go in and finish it. But these have been some really hard pieces to paint. I've only finished Conan out of those. And speaking of Conan, here's another one. This is Red Sonja. Super rare piece. I'm just holding them all sideways. I'm sure it's driving somebody insane. But her sword broke in her hand. You can see there, she has no sword. It was really flimsy to begin with, and then it just fell off the shelf and straight up broke. So what can you do? Anyway, so there's my mechanics shelf. This is a really nifty one here. I'll show you. The Grimoire of Lost Souls. So this is essentially, before the medium came out, this was an entire class built around summoning spirits and dead souls, which would then, you could then petition them to do things for you, or you could get powers from them. This one's one of my personal favorites for when I actually play, especially when I'm playing Brother Fenn, whose level 20 version is very high on the summoning. Summoner's Compendium lists every basic creature from the bestiaries that can be summoned, shows them with the divine and what's the other one? The evil archetypes, the fiendish archetypes, and then has a lot of white space on the pages, which is where I write in further archetypes and augmentations, such as Mythic and whatnot. There's 1001 spells. So the only book that I know that's missing from my shelf for 100% is it's one part mechanics and then it's one part setting as well, is the deep magic spells, which would actually go right here. The 1001 spells is a great way to beef up your spell list if you need more. There's 101 aquatic spells, which I'm currently running Freeing Nethys in the Midgard setting for one of my face-to-face groups. And that is essentially a pirate or water-based campaign. So 101 aquatic spells gives them more tools to play with. There you can see All That Glimmers. Another one from Raging Swan Press, part of which is covered in the dungeon dressing book down here. But it's essentially a treasure table. So if your players kill something, you're not sure what kind of treasure to give them, just open up All That Glimmers, look for the appropriate level, and there you go. Now you can see Mythic stuff, which is some of my absolute favorites. Mythic's kind of got a bad rap over the past few years, but really just, my guess is just from Pathfinder Society players that are not allowed to, the DMs aren't allowed to adjust the adventure when they're running it, and then the players, you know, they have very specific guidelines for playing. But I don't know, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe it's just people that played Wrath of the Righteous when it first came out and they didn't read the rules right, and now they're mad about it. But regardless, I really enjoy Mythic play. It lets you lets you do the whole epic thing that you might have always wanted to do, and all the blame for that can be based on this. If you go all the way back to first edition, Deities and Demigods, this version had the Cthulhu monsters in it, Elric of Melnibone, all the various pantheons, Native American, Greek, Chinese, Japanese, so on and so forth, and had all their stats, and you could go in and counter them and whatnot. There's even a really cool series here from a third-party publisher at the time, Fantastic Treasures. 1 and 2 covers like the magic items of those amazing mythological heroes. Monsters of Myth and Legend, 1 through 3. And you can see this is a series that's continued over the various iterations of Dungeons & Dragons. One of the few books I kept from 2nd edition. I purged all of my 2nd edition books. I was never a huge fan of it. Is Legends and Lore, which is the evolved version of Deities and Demigods. But anyway, so there you go. Got some Spelljammer stuff. Ravenloft, which, like I said, I'm currently playing in a Ravenloft game, believe it or not. Here's my various settings. Got Freeport there, with the Bestiary Companion, Black Monastery, right next to Teagle Manor, Bard's Gate from the Lost Lands. You got Northland Saga, which is an adventure, but it's also kind of a setting. Then you've got the Midgard stuff here, Midgard Player's Guide, Southlands, which is part of Midgard, all the way down to the first 5e book I ever bought. Just because it's Midgard stuff, it covers a lot of mechanic-free information about the lore and flavor of Midgard. And you've got Razor Coast, which is has a little bit of tech hidden in it, which is what makes it different from Freeport. Then you've got Kaladar, which is really cool. This is kind of the Pathfinder or 3rd edition version of Spelljammers to a certain extent. See, they have the flying ships created by Bruce Hurd, who wrote some stories for Dragon Magazine back in the day. So on and so forth, all the way down to the Piece de Resistance, Legendary Planet. That has to be the biggest one. Look at that bad boy. But anyway, so if you're playing in my games, it's just to give you a little peek at what we have. Running the engine behind it all. There's the various bestiaries up through mythic stuff, template books, 2 mythic manuals, various mythic minis, all the way up to the Cthulhu stuff. Here you can see this year we have Ultimate Spheres of Power and Spheres of Might on the shelf. Got Spelljammer for all the tech stuff. You got the various compendiums, Pirate Compendium, Forest Kingdom Compendium, Gothic Campaign Compendium, Path of War. But anyway, if there's a certain specific area of the shelf you'd like to check out, perhaps we can zoom in on it. If not, then that was just to give you all just a little peek, little taste. So anyway, so next time, may all of your rolls be a nat 20, unless you're at my table. And then in that case, I hope mine are nat 20s. But the rest of you, we'll see you next time. Bye. Give this a like. Let me know what you think.